Galéir a Cordia agus tá fáilte rót, and welcome to my story with me, Dr. Mary Honan on Lear Media. And today is the 27th of January 2023, and it's become known the world over as Holocaust Memorial Day. And as commemorations are happening all around the world, I'm privileged on this show today to have Peninah Zilberman, who is the founder and CEO of the BA Jewish History. She's a Judaic teacher, and she's director of the Holocaust Museum in Toronto, organizer of the National Professional Conference across Canada, and she served as Sisterhood President-Adath Israel Synagogue. And she's the past chair of Modiin chapter Israel. Peninah is the daughter of Romanian Holocaust survivors. And I'm going to talk to her. I've spoken to Peninah before. I keep calling her Peninah, and I do apologize, Peninah. Hello, how are you? I'm going to speak to you today again. Welcome back.
Yes, I was thinking how many years ago we spoke, about 6-7 years ago, you had me on the show.
Yeah, I don't think it's that long ago. God, I hope it's not that long
Yes, it is. I'll tell you how I made calculations. Number one, 3 years is the corona and whatever comes before. So
God
that's
almighty. Do you know, Peninah, it's a long time, and it's a special day that I have you on here today.
I am really honored that you invited me. You are my last spot for the day after spending almost the whole day with students across Romania. Close to 500 students listened to me, and I, of course, responded to their inquiries. And they are so sensitive and they are so into it. Really, it amazes me the types of questions that they are asking. At one school, I saw also some works in 3D that the teacher had inspired them to do. So it's been a very interesting day. Yes, for sure.
Peninah, I know they do a lovely thing in Israel. They stop, everything stops, and a horn blows so many times, and you see all the cars stopping. Did that happen today?
No. Israel is really not observing this day. The president of Israel spoke this morning, I believe, or yesterday at the EU Parliament in Brussels.
Yeah.
We have a major event, which is around April, according to the Hebrew calendar. Yeah. And it exactly happens what you mentioned.
Yeah.
You see, I believe as a Holocaust educator that this day, the 27th of January, is a great addition to commemorate internationally. And that is the purpose of it. Now, beside that, every country in Europe has its own observance. Just for the sake, I'm so much connected with Romania. October the 9th is the day assigned by the Romanian government to observe the Romanian Jewish Holocaust.
Wow, yeah. That's interesting that it goes. No, I understand about the Hebrew calendar and everything being different, but I was, aware that they do celebrate Holocaust Memorial Day, albeit on a different day than International Holocaust Memorial Day. Peninah, you set up an organization in Romania, where your mother is from. Maybe you'd like to tell us a little bit about that and the importance, I suppose, of continuing education for well, everyone really, not just the young, but also for the older, because it's important not to forget as much as it is to learn about.
Definitely. So in 2013, let's start like this. I've been visiting Romania since 1998, 10 years after the revolution,
Yeah,
um, in December of 1989, when the communist regime came down and they started to be more westernized. Now, I
yeah,
must say that the way it says in the Bible that the Jews had to walk for 40 years in order that their slavery mentality should stop. It's not 100% yet in Romania. They are only on the 33rd year. So, but they are trying very hard. So in 2013, when I was there in Sighet, which is the very famous city where Professor Elie Wiesel was born also.
that's right. Yes.
Yes. And so I came with the idea that I want to observe the 70th anniversary to the deportations. The deportations in Sighet started between the 16 and 22 of May 1944, quite late, almost at the end of the war.
Well,
Excuse me. So I approached the city hall. They gave me an okay, and I did the first conference of intergenerational descendants to come to Sighet. We had 120 people from all over the world.
wow.
That gave me a boost to open the foundation. And the foundation has basically two simple missions. One is for the all generations descendants of Jewish descendancy to provide them genealogical services and to assist them in organizing their family roots journey.
Mm-hmm.
The other mission, which takes much more time, and I'm very devoted about it, is the education to, as you mentioned, the young generation, but also we provide programs that are open to the general public. I did start small in Sighet, but with the Zoom,
Yeah,
I've
Zoom
been
approved.
now all over Romania. And last summer, I really, really traveled a lot with people that for 3 years couldn't travel. So I packed a lot of traveling between June and October.
But tell
Uh,
me, what was it like? Well, firstly, what was it like growing up the son of or the daughter of survivors? Because I know a lot of survivors, they have had different experiences. Some have grown up with parents who completely shut down and completely emotionally stunted. Others and never wanted to talk about the Shoah. Others then, like my friend Toba Abramczyk from Toronto, her father
right.
was very vocal about it and a very warm father to her. Not everybody was blessed with that because people brought their own emotions, I suppose, as a consequence of the camp, and they brought them into their new lives. And into their relationships with their children. Some became overprotected, some protective, some became disinterested in their children.
And
What was
also abusive.
an
Let's
abusive?
be open.
Well, that is true. I have spoken to some who found being the children of Holocaust survivors very abusive and very closed and silent and lonely.
Yeah.
What was your experiences?
Okay, so let me tell you, my experience was quite interesting and also a little bit unusual. Now, let me explain why. Usually, a child of Holocaust survivors did not have grandparents.
Yeah.
In my case, I had a set of grandparents, the parents of my father, who came from Bucharest. And the people in Bucharest were not deported. They did have a pogrom for 3 days in January 21st to the 23rd, 1941. And the young men, like my father, would be forced to do certain jobs for no pay.
Yeah.
So my parents, my mother came from Sweden on an Israeli mission to collect survivors.
Yeah.
And she went on a boat in Marseille. And that's where she met my father, who came from Bucharest. And they arrived in Israel. My father was right away drafted because it was 1948, the war.
Yeah.
And she started to work. She was a qualified dressmaker. And after the war, he came, he asked her to get married and so on. Both of them were very enthusiastic Zionists. And they wanted to move to the country to build farms and kibbutzim and so on. Grandma was a very cultured lady, spoke 5 languages. She said, my granddaughter is not going in the wild desert. I will take care of her. So until the age of 8 years old, I would see my parents only once a month. They would come for a full day to visit me. So in a way, my parents were quite strange to me. I knew they are my parents, but strange.
Yeah.
So Grandma, for example, taught me Romanian when I went to kindergarten at the age of 6. That's when I started to learn Hebrew. So
you were born in Israel.
Yes, Haifa.
Yeah.
So I was extremely lucky, thank God, that I didn't live the way when I came. When I was 8 and I came home because they finally decided to settle, then Grandma said, okay, now you can have her. Really, just like that. It was a different experience. I found 2 individuals who today, bless their hearts and may they rest in peace, should have never lived together. 2 very different people. Yes, that's most of the cases of the survivor marriages.
Marriages of convenience, really, to build families.
It wasn't convenience. You know what it was? It was the urge, the Jewish urge for continuity to have children, to continue, because we've lost so much. That was the urge.
Yeah.
So my mother was very sensitive. She did carry some kind of a trauma, but she didn't scream at night. And, you know, all these stories were not there. She chose to block her memory from deportation till liberation. And she told me the beautiful life she had with her family before the war. And I know a lot about that life. My father, who was not deported, he would just talk about the war all day. He was a real soldier. And he fought also, of course, in 48 in Israel, and in 56, and in 67. He cashed in 3 wars. So he would speak about the wars and politics and all those subjects constantly.
Yeah.
Mother, before a holiday, she'll tell me, oh, I'm going to bake this and that and cook this and that, because that's what we used to eat.
Yeah.
Everything I know about my mother's war years is from her first cousin, who's today still alive, but not very well, in Sighet, 93 years old, bless her heart, and
Wow.
from my mother's sister, who also passed away. So this was the house. But what I chose, as I was about 12 or 13, and I decided, because you see, most of my parents' friends in the village that we lived were survivors. So
Yeah.
I was, encountered only with the second generation children and with the survivors.
Mm.
I decided that I'm going to be a winner and a victorious person.
Yeah.
I am not going to carry that big, big burden that happened. I'm going to use the fact that my mother and my father survived and I was born, and I'm going to try to find my life mission, which I
In a,
did.
in a sense, their suffering became the impetus, and I suppose the big gaps in their story and your relationship or lack thereof with them became, I suppose, the impetus that actually drove you to being the person you are today. And in a sense, I suppose the person you are today is as a consequence of their suffering. Would you
Yes,
have been, none of us know what we would be had it not been for A, B, or C. But
right.
no, but you have no idea what you would be had your parents not been Holocaust survivors, because what you're doing now is a way of turning a tragedy in a horror into something positive through your educational work. And I know you do a lot of work through the arts, if you like. You're
Yes, through culture. Yes, that's what
yeah.
I do. So
and
I
that's
bring,
and that's my life as well, because my background as a dancer and as an art teacher, or as a qualified trained artist, that's one thing that gravitated me towards you, was the fact that you use. A lot of
oh,
people
you're
would
so,
say that using the Holocaust and representing it through poetry or through art is an abomination, that the Holocaust shouldn't be represented. I, on the other hand, believe it's the perfect way of getting people, some who may not be um, into reading books but love art, to actually represent the art, to engage with it through art, to engage with it through drama, to engage with it through writing, um, rather than necessarily reading about it. How do you feel about that? I presume you think the same way.
I think exactly the same. And the way I teach at the various schools, when I'm face to face or when we do workshops for a couple of days, I have a person, Romanian lady, that does beautiful comics. I have a person that does movement. And when we do a workshop, like from Monday to Thursday,
That
I
sounds
divide
fascinating.
certain classes, and usually I mix them up. So what happens is we earn a few things, not just the subject of expressing your feelings or expressing your emotions regarding the Holocaust. Because the history teacher is teaching them all the horrors, excuse me, and all the facts. I take that material and turn it into creativity and
Yeah.
applying it to bullying today. That's a subject that's extremely important in the school. To every class today that I spoke, I ended up with that.
Do you know,
And
Peninah, sorry for interrupting you. That
sure,
is exactly the way. I mean, I taught in a university, in a college here. I taught the Holocaust through creativity, and got and encouraged, and they were all student teachers, primary school teachers, studying to be primary school teachers. How were they going to go into the second into a primary school and teach a 7 or an 8-year-old about a subject like the Holocaust? how were they going to introduce it? And I
Mhm.
suppose my research, my own PhD was on, I looked at comics and fairy tales and allegories and time travel novels, and how
Exactly.
they approached the subject for maybe 8, 9 year olds, how they introduced them without inundating them with too much terror. And I think people forget the importance of these media to in engaging young children without terrifying them, allowing them the space to ask their teachers or their parents, but what happened here? What happened there? And that's exactly what you're doing.
Yes. And in addition, I bring plays and
Yeah,
concerts and movies. And I'll tell you something. Tarbut, the foundation, has been very lucky to be part of a project sponsored by EU through AEPJ, which is the organization for keeping and restoring patrimonial Jewish sites in Europe.
okay.
So, being part of this big project that is titled Memory, I have been contacting various arts people because Tarbut is managing the whole is managing all the programs across Romania. There are
Yeah,
5 countries. So it's Spain, it's France, Romania, and Germany and Austria, all these 5 countries. So we are actually the only Eastern European or former Eastern European country.
be
And
great to
so
start something like that here in Ireland.
very good. And so between September to the end of November, it's called the European Jewish Heritage Days. I am planning a lot of music and plays and exhibits and all these things around the topic of memory. And it's not just going to be the Holocaust. The minute you say memory, for some people, right away, oops, yeah, Holocaust. No, it's not going to be
No, no,
just
no.
that. Right. We need to have memories before, you know. I'll tell you something. A new topic is and I already presented it in January, yeah, this month at the beginning to a group of teachers how to teach the subject of Holocaust through photographs and going to visit cemeteries.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. To Jewish cemeteries.
Yes. Um, and it's the pictures, it's easier because you see a picture and that you can relate. But to go to a Jewish cemetery, I presume that you've been or you've seen pictures, a
Yeah,
lot of the text on the monument is in Hebrew.
yeah.
So I've been giving them tips. You don't really need to know, the language, but certain things, and it's amazing. We will do really on site some workshops late in the spring, because now it's snowing and it's muddy, and it's not the right season to do the visits on site at the cemeteries. But this is something new that I came up with, because I stay away from the atrocious things. Oh, and I should mention that the pictures that I encourage to be used are pictures of before the war, before they were deported, and after. Not to use the pictures that were taken by the enemy,
Interesting.
because we are not portrayed the way we really were.
Interesting. I interviewed a man not so long ago. John Wood is his name,
Yes.
and John Wood, his stepfather was multimillionaire Kenwood chef, the kitchen
Oh, yes.
Kenwood chef. That was his stepfather, but his father was actually the first officer, the British officer, to liberate Bergen-Belsen and to take
That's
over.
where my mother was liberated on April 15,
And
45.
and his father was the major in charge of the camp, taking over the humanitarian side of it. And he
Wow.
put together this most extraordinary documentary via TikTok. And you're
Oh,
only allowed, or well, no, they were tweets, and they were done almost like he was sending tweets to people. This is what's happening. This is what's happening, and it's now 4:45 p.m. and we've entered Bergen-Belsen, and it's up on Twitter, and
I'll
I'll
have a look.
send you the info. But it was done in the most amazing way to engage youngsters into, youngsters nowadays have such short attention spans, it
Oh,
seems.
tell me about it.
What
Yes.
watch a Twitter is long enough, and these were all sent as Twitter with his photograph up on his Twitter account, and uh, but Leonard Berney was his name, Berney, and it's just an amazing way of engaging people. Not, I suppose, not just children and youth, but everyone that has short attention spans. But you're still getting that information out in bite sizes,
Yeah.
and
And what you do also, you create interest and curiosity. So
curiosity.
that's
That's
right.
exactly it. That's
Yes.
exactly it. They're going to
So
read
what
more.
happens? So what happens is, yes, you are 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but then when they are on their own, they continue to research.
Or
So
they ask
you
their parents, or they ask their
right,
teacher.
yeah.
I mean,
So there,
I interviewed Dr. Bernd Vollschläger, who ironically is a convert to Judaism, and he to Orthodox Judaism. He moved to Israel. He's now living in Florida. But Dr. Byrne's father was Arthur Vollschläger, who was decorated by Adolf Hitler with the Knight's Cross. And Byrne was born in 1958. I think it was 58 in the US. In the US, no, it was in Germany, and it was his teacher in school who told him what was going on during the war and what his father was involved in. And it was only during the Olympics, when the Israeli team were massacred,
oh yeah, right, in
started
70s.
to get an interest, and he realized that his father was hiding so much. There was so much that he wasn't talking about. He couldn't quite put his finger on it. And not long afterwards, he converted to Judaism, and his children and his wife are all following the Jewish tradition and the Jewish religion. But he was such a fascinating man. But it was just this knowing that there was something not being talked about, and it was the
You
teacher.
feel it.
It was
Children feel the secrecy. But I'll tell you something. The same, I went back in the early 90s to Berlin. I was invited through the embassy in Toronto to
yeah,
attend this second generation conference where we were 20 children of Holocaust survivors and 20 children of former Nazi at various high levels.
yeah,
Both groups had almost the same symptoms. Our parents didn't tell certain things. I mean, in our families, there's plenty of secrets. The same thing was in their families,
yeah,
and so on and so forth. So both groups were affected
yeah.
by
There were
the trauma.
there were victims. The war created more victims
Exactly.
than I mean, physical and emotional, and with children who then found out, like Bernd, who converted, and because his father had nothing to do with him after he converted, he was kind of ostracized from his family. He wanted nothing to do with his father afterwards, or his mother. His mother was his mother was very wealthy family. The father not so much, but he was a tank commandant in the Nazi tank commandant, and it was just sad to see the fracturing in a family because of the actions of one or two members
Yes.
of the family, and how the children suffer as a consequence of it. But they almost lose their victimhood because they were the sons of perpetrators rather than the sons of victims.
Right.
Do
Yeah.
you know, in some
Yeah.
sense?
But we do have. What else can I tell you? You raised the issue of overprotection.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not ashamed to say that I don't know how to swim and I don't know how to ride a bike.
Oh, I do.
Because there was the fear I'll fall, I'll break an arm, a leg, a head, I'll drown, and I was an only child.
I'm an only child. Yeah.
Most of the survivors had only one child. Now, that happened because of a few reasons. Number one, if the woman went under certain experiments at camp, there was an issue. Like my aunt had an issue of becoming pregnant.
Okay.
The other issue was there were no daycares. Like in the early 50s in Israel, there wasn't daycare. There was no babysitters. There was no live-in, in my case, grandma brought me up, So one child was just enough, And of course, it has positive and negative things. I used to become the stepsister, or the way one of the neighbors used to say, the adopted kid in the family at many other families. And I would spend very little time at home, but I would spend a lot of time at the other families where there would be 2 children or 3 children, non-survivors. Okay, you see the difference. So so overprotection. I never went on a class trip until I put my foot down when I was 12.
Oh, I never put my foot down, Dorrit says. I never put my foot down, Peninah. I was
really
the only child of an only child, totally overprotective.
No, I did finally, and I said, I'm sorry, we're going to Jerusalem. I want to go on that trip, period. And I went, and I came back, and thank God I'm still alive. So
I put my foot down when I was 30, when I wanted to buy a car, and there was no way I was getting a car. I was 30. No way I was getting a car. And I finally, it was only when the car arrived outside the door, she had no other choice. She was petrified something would happen.
Yes.
That is traumatic, though, when you're not allowed that, when you're held back, if you like, because of fears that your parents may have.
Yeah.
Or experiences.
Now, I want to raise another issue that brings me into the abuse. The other issue is that many of our parents had previous families that unfortunately
died
at the war, because let's say the wife had a child below the age of 13, she was automatically going on the left side with the child. Now, I have some stories where a mother-in-law would say, give me the baby and you go on the right.
Yeah.
And the mother stayed alive, and the baby with the grandmother, the mother-in-law, went to the crematorium. Now, many of these, especially the men, I have noticed. Now, you should know that I met so many survivors and I know so many stories. I never sit down to do research, like a real student. I mean, I just have my BA in history and that's about, but I helped everybody else who did masters and PhDs. That's okay. So I have noticed men that had a wife and children, could be 1, 2, 3, depends, and came back and looked for the woman and child or something and never found. They would get married. In many cases, they would get married either with somebody from the same town, village, city, or a relative that was available. Now, here is the mistake.
Available is the way you said it.
Oh. Now, here is the mistake, and God will forgive me. They named their mutual new child to one of the names of the child that was murdered in the Holocaust. I use the word murdered and not perish. I'm against this word perish. So they would use the name. And what would happen is that the parent, now, this is another general phenomena. When somebody dies that you love them very much, it doesn't matter if during the period that they were alive, they were good, they were bad, you were fighting with them, whatever the relationship, you make it after they pass away that it was utopia and this was the best person, etc. So these parents, and this is part of the trauma that they lost a child, they make that child that was murdered the best thing in the world, and that child could have been only 3 or 4.
There's a book.
Look, let me just finish the thought, please. And they look and they treat the child from the mutual new relationship as the other kid. And if this kid does something wrong, that's when the belt comes out and they start to hurt. And I've seen it with my own eyes with a girlfriend that we grew up together on the village. He would go mad, nuts. Wow. I mean, I would scream when I would see it. And this is a physical abuse. Now, there was also sexual abuse, which I don't want to get into that, but there was. So these were very hard times for a child to develop, to live. Many of the, especially girls, would get married very fast. At the age of 18, they found somebody and they got married. And you know that, well, maybe 65% were successful, the other ones were not, because they didn't have enough knowledge of relationships or how to deal, I myself, a little bit in this area, was very wrong. Today, at my age, I sit and analyze and I look at this different.
Yeah.
But 30, 40 years ago, it wasn't.
It's a hard life. I mean, I look at the comic, the famous comic, Art Spiegelman's Mouse.
Oh, yes.
I suppose when you were talking there, that actually brought that back to me, Vladek and his obsession with his...
That's right.
His son who had died in the Shoah, died in Auschwitz, and his wife's suicide and how she had actually died because of really what her son's death. She couldn't cope with it. And, how he used to treat Art Spiegelman and always call him by his previous son's name.
That's right. You see?
And I interviewed another man who was a survivor of, he's the only survivor of 12 camps, still alive. He's 100 this year. I interviewed him last year when he was not, and he's still driving. He's amazing. But his name now, I mean, in English, or the Hebrew of it was the name of his dead brother, Joseph. And he took Joseph when he moved to America, but he was called, you know, it was all the things I was thinking of when you were talking were, you know, where people take on the name of a dead brother, or the dead brother or sister becomes almost omnipotent and just, you know, perfect. There's no, there were no faults with them because they're
Yeah,
living.
it's like a fantasy.
Yeah, because they're living through what is it, gold, rose tinted glasses at the past,
Yes,
and your mother, in a sense, lived the past with rose colored glasses because she only thought about the positive things. She had
yes,
completely sheltered herself from allowing those thoughts of what had happened to her. And
yes.
that in itself, sometimes blocking it out can be worse, can have more adverse effects than actually, like you, being able to talk. Do you know?
Yeah, I agree with you. Yes, I agree with you. And she was a very smart woman. My daughter said to me one day when my daughter was 14, 15, and she spent the whole summer with my mom because I was on a course in Jerusalem. And she said to me, you know, Grandma Shari should have been a journalist. I said, why? She says, you should see how she writes, how she speaks. Sabaoto didn't let her to talk. That was my father. My father was an overpowering person. And don't forget, in those days, the woman was very sort of quiet, timid. She would cook, she would please everybody. You know, the status was different.
Yeah. Not in
Why
my
are
house.
you
Not in my
smiling?
house. It was the other way around.
Ah, okay, different houses.
The other way
So,
around.
yeah. So my mother really didn't reach her potential. She did reach her potential by being a great dressmaker that a lot of people would come and love her creativity, you know, whatever she created. But verbally, she didn't have that opportunity. I took it.
I was just going to say, you actually inherited the creativity because, you know, I mean, you are involved in, I suppose, the most um, extreme form of creativity because you're actually bringing something that is completely horrific, a past that could be, you know, considered, well, is absolutely horrific, but you're bringing it into so many different media to try and introduce children who are creative beings anyway. I mean, children lose their creativity as they get older because it's beaten out of them, or it's trained out of them. You're less, and it's to actually train people again to actually find, I have this, you know, I'm an artist. For instance, if you said you were an artist or you were into poetry, well, use poetry to create what you've learned about the Holocaust, or use art. Show me what you've learned about the Shoah through art, through literature, through poetry, through whatever medium, through stained glass, whatever you're into,
Sure.
represent, you know, and it's amazing. I mean, when you look at the Holocaust and you look at Theresienstadt, and I'm thinking particularly of Peter Ginz, who died in Auschwitz, and Peter's painting of moon landscape was brought to the moon with Ilan Raman, who was the first Israeli astronaut onto the moon, and the space shuttle Columbia exploded on its.
Yesterday was 20 years. We
That's
we
right.
talked about it, right?
And when you know, when you look at the artwork that Peter Ginz did inside the camp, when you look at the art that came out amidst all the horrors that was happening around them, they were able to create on matchboxes or on any little thing that they were able to find. They were able to create beauty amidst all of these horrors, you know?
Sure. Now, let me tell you an interesting thing. You mentioned Terezin and
Yeah.
expression and so on. An interesting thing happened in one of the classes in actually a small town in the middle of Romania. But the teacher is very dedicated, where two girls put together a collage, and mainly you saw butterflies. So I challenged them and I asked them, why did you put butterflies and all this? Did you read somewhere?
I
No,
never
we
saw another
didn't read.
butterfly.
We didn't read. So she said to me, butterflies, probably they were 15 years old. Probably were not in Auschwitz. It was Auschwitz camp like. And we felt that probably that's what the inmates dreamt about. I said, let me tell you. So when she finished to show her collage, I brought to their attention, I never saw another butterfly, the
That's what I
poem.
was just about to say to you, that the poem I never
Yes,
saw
and
another
I
butterfly.
sent to the teacher a link, and she promised me that now she's going to teach them a unit about, you see, in these kinds of presentations that I make, in a way, the teacher gets an extra resource, by the way, because I've sent her now this material. Now she's going to talk about Terezin. I'm trying to get them out of Auschwitz, excuse me the way I say it, because everything is Auschwitz, Auschwitz, and it's not.
Well, there was amazing work in Terezin. I mean,
Exactly.
just amazing
So,
music,
yeah.
music.
So now
And
we introduce the butterfly vis-a-vis the collage of the students in the class, which I thought that that was very unusual way of expressing themselves, you know?
it's interesting about Terezin because most of the really creative and famous people, famous Jewish people, um, Hitler, because I suppose because of his love of art and his love, he had a love of music, and temporarily he couldn't justify famous people vanishing off the face of the earth, because the international community would be questioning, where is this musician, where is that conductor, where is this artist gone? Everything would have looked too obvious. So they were put into Terezin, and they created and they were involved in the most magnificent. I mean, Peter Ginns, he had a little newspaper called Vedem,
That's
um,
right.
and then there was a blind artist in Terezin, and he created. He said, because he lost his sight when he was a child, and he still remembered the world. I thought it was just amazing. He still remembered the world as a child when it was beautiful. So he was only able to create beauty because his eyes hadn't been touched by the evil that was going on around him. Yes, he was experiencing it, but he couldn't. He could still create by touch. He was a sculptor, and he is to sculpt, even though he could not see what he was sculpting, but he could feel and he could sense what he was sculpting, but he could only see as a child. So his world vision hadn't been changed by the horrors that were going on around him. And I suppose, to me, it said so much about how much you can see even when you can't see. Sometimes you can see more as a blind person, because your world, your sight isn't affected by the horrors that are going on around you. You're still in touch with
Yes.
your childhood self. And it was amazing. And Peter Ginns, the work that was created in Terezin, despite having nothing, maybe a matchbox, and using the the matches to create
Mm-hmm.
art. I mean, it just goes to prove what human beings can do in order to keep alive.
Yeah,
One,
well, that is called, spiritual resistance. And I'm pretty sure you've heard about the Brunderbar opera
Oh
of
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
children that was
Is
composed in Terezin. Yeah, we staged it twice in Toronto.
there's a woman in England. She's still alive. She was a cellist in the Brunderbar orchestra, and
Really?
she's a famous cellist in and she has spoken at many. She's on YouTube. I'll send you her information, but she's
Thank
amazing. And she was in Auschwitz as well. But that was the
Mhm.
only thing that kept her alive, was the fact that she could play the cello.
That's right. That's where she found solace, right?
Do you know? But physically, it was the only thing that kept her alive, because they needed somebody for the orchestra, and she
Yeah.
and she said, in a sense, it was horrible what was going on around you, and you were there to play, but you knew if you didn't and you refused, then you would die.
Then you die. That's right.
Anita Lasker, I think her name is Anita
Mhm.
Lasker. But so, what does Holocaust Memorial Day mean for you? How important do you think it is, Peninah?
I don't have a specific day. I don't, in my life, there's no specific day like today or Yom HaShoah in April or the 9th of October. For me, every day, I have the picture of my grandparents and the whole family in my living room here. I carry a smaller picture in my wallet. It's part of me. I don't devote a specific time. It's actually, I'm walking with it, I'm living it, but in a victorious way. Yes, I'm kind of tearing now, but I am not, by no means, God forbid, depressed or, affected medically because of what has happened, or I blame or I take responsibility. I never point fingers to no one. The only thing that I have sometimes is asking myself, excuse me,
I
how
don't want you to get upset now, Peninah.
no, I'm not. I'm not. It's okay. I'm asking myself sometimes, if I would have been a non Jew, if I would have been a righteous person. That's what I'm asking myself sometimes. How would that felt? And if I would do something in order to save one, 10, none, five, I don't know, if I would be in the resistance, these are the questions that I'm asking myself.
Yeah, it's a natural question. Tommy Reichenthal here in Ireland. Tommy was 9 when he was released from Bergen-Belsen. And Tommy always says, but for the grace of God, I could have been the son of a perpetrator, or
Correct.
or I could have been somebody who turned their back on. It just so happens, he says, I unfortunately was all his, most of his family, were 13 members, I think, of his family were killed, and but he's lived here for many years in Ireland, and we love him dearly in this country. But he did pose that question, what but for the grace of God, I could be on the other side. So he lives his life like, I just happened to be born Jewish and a victim. I could just as easily have been born the son of a perpetrator, or the son of somebody who just turned their eyes. Would I have done the same if I was a right? The very same questions you're posing right
Yeah.
now. They're very honest questions.
So that's my only, but I speak. I carry the name of my grandmother. Her name was Perla. But
Perla, isn't that lovely?
Perla. But
Perla.
my mother, by being such a Zionist and living in Israel, says, I'm not going to call the little girl Perla like back home. I want to call her Peninah, and Peninah is a pearl. So,
and indeed you are a pearl.
oh,
You know
thank you so
the
very
pearl.
much.
The pearl is my birthstone.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm the 27th of June, and
Oh,
and
nice.
and the pearl is my birthstone, which is why I wear pearls all the time. But I was just thinking while you were talking there earlier on as well. There's an extraordinary book. It happens to be my favorite book on the Holocaust.
Which
It's
is?
ironic to say a favorite book on the Holocaust, but it's so beautifully done, and it's called Auschwitz, and it's by a French artist called Pascal Crochet,
Mhm.
Croci. The artwork is just singularly the most extraordinary thing I've ever seen. It's everything is technically to scale of what the camps looked like, the measurements of the camps, everything in it. There's 2 pages right in the center, and they're just, when you open the pages, all you see are clouds, smoke, nothing, just smoke. And before it, they're talking about the gas chambers, and it represents, all you see are these little speech bullets telling you, screaming for help or whatever, or shouting what's happening, and it just represents, in a blank page, really, the horror and the fear and the emotion and in the unsure feelings that people had of what's happening here, as they were, as the clouds were in of smoke or gas was enveloping them. This like, what's going on, this terror of not knowing what was happening them. But you really should. It's just the most beautiful book,
I'll look it up.
most beautifully illustrated, and I just love the book. I don't ever want it's just one book I don't even want to open, because I love it. It's a big book, but not too thick, but it's kind of like a A2 in size. It's big, but yeah, I
It's
love
like
it.
a coffee table book, no?
No, it's bigger than it's God, it's about
Okay.
that size, and
All right.
but it's just called Auschwitz, and the eyes of the characters in it are just enormous, and you're just drawn into the whole book. But I suppose, as a creative person, I think you would be drawn into it as well. It's a book that you could probably use in your school.
I'll have a look, yeah.
It's a graphic novel. It's a graphic
Hmm.
novel. But what do you hope to do now? What's your next move with regards to Romania?
Well,
You're in
as I
Israel
said,
right
we have this big project memory. Thank God we don't need to use Zoom. So I am looking to organize programs even in communities that once upon a time had Jews, today they don't. And I hope to work with the municipalities. So basically, it's more of an awareness. I should mention that in November 2021, the parliament in Romania agreed by the proposal of the Jewish Federation in Bucharest to have the subject of Holocaust and Jewish heritage part of the regular curriculum together with the Roma people. And this will start as of September 2023. So in a way, it blends well with with this project, the EU project of memory. Another big thing that's going to be is one of the other sort of mini missions of Tarbut is to take books that are written in Hebrew or in the English language, either memoir or fiction, nonfiction, poems, and to translate them to Romanian.
Lovely.
So I have a book already that's it's actually in the last stages of the translation. It's called The Takeaway Man by Meryl Ain, Ain. It won a few prizes already, and it will be translated. So it's almost done. So we are looking at April, May to launch and have a book tour across Romania. Again,
Wow.
now, if somebody is asking me, why do you do that? I tell them that not to hurt the feelings of all the other survivors that lived in Romania during communism time and wrote, but the issue was that all their writings was being censored.
Yeah.
So when we read what they wrote, it's like blocks that are completely empty because it was censored, it was cut.
Yeah.
Where this literature that comes from the West, it's not censored, so they can read the real thing.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so that's just another. It's enough. I'll be busy enough just with that.
Well, you probably noticed what I had down at the bottom going across in the banner was,
yes, of course, I saw
Holocaust
that.
Memorial Day, when the bombs stopped pouring or falling and the guns fell silent. 6 million Jews lay dead. A fourth of these were children. And it's extraordinary that I'm able to interview you today on the 27th of January, 2023, again for our second time, not for our last, though,
No.
Peninah. But thank you so very much for being my guest today. And let's hope that there'll be continuing education about the horrors that happened, so that we can ensure that they don't continue again, either with towards the Jewish people or towards any ethnic group, because no ethnic group should ever have to suffer what the Jews have suffered, not just, I suppose, in the Holocaust, but through the centuries. Thank you, Peninah, and shalom.
Shalom and thank you. And we say Lehitra Ot. I'll be in London at the International Genealogy Conference at the end of July. Maybe you can come down there and we can meet.
Oh, I'd love to. Oh, I'll absolutely.
I'll send you the information.
Fabulous. I'll be there.
Great. Thank you very much. Have a nice weekend and all the best. And I'll say Shabbat Shalom because it's Friday evening too.
Shabbat Shalom. Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.